Manufactured exports recently, but South Africa has brand power. Brand Finance Africa has released its annual report on South Africa's 50 most valuable brands. It says the report provides a measurable, independent account of how well South Africa is doing in building its identity as a winning nation. Now, MTN, Sasol, Vodacom, Standard Bank and ABSA topping the list, the top five. Brand Africa says the total brand value of these brands increased by 18% to over 340 billion rand this year. MTN tops the list in South Africa, in Africa as well, and it's part of the Brand Finance 500 top global brands. Well, to discuss brand power, we're now joined by the chairman of Brand Finance Africa, Thebe Ikalafeng. Great to have you with us, Thebe. Well, what are you measuring here, first of all? Is this the market cap? So we're looking at big companies rather than, that measure of brand equity itself.
So we are looking here at listed companies, and we are looking at the value of the brand, which is the key driver of the total valuation of a business.
Okay, so MTN, massive here, massive in Africa, on this global list. How do you get there?
What we do, our methodology is quite simple. We use what we call a royalty relief methodology. In other words, what we do is we try and make an assumption that if I had to rent out this brand or to lease out this brand, what royalty would I charge? We take that royalty and we look at the income of the company and we try and bring it back to a net present value and say, if I had to put this brand, the brand portion on sale, what will this business be worth? That's what we do in the simplest form.
Okay, it's very interesting to me because telecoms are all there, Vodacom as well, and the banks. And these are the things that people complain about. My cell phone's not working again, or my bank's giving me problems. Is this because we need them in our lives, so that's why they're so important, or is it because of real appeal as well?
Well, indeed, financial services and telecommunications are enabling businesses. They are catalyst businesses because what they do, they enable us to transact, they enable us to connect, and they enable us really to live our lives, if you will. And that's why they dominate the list. Not just this, but any other list internationally. Telecoms and financial services certainly among the top. And that's why you even see in our top 10, you've got MTN. You've got MTN, you've got Vodacom, you've got Standard Bank. You've got Investec, you've got FNB. So all the key...
Some of them coming up right now,
indeed.
And Sasol's there. Why Sasol?
Very interesting, because Sasol generally you view it as a corporate brand, isn't it? As a B2B rather than a B2C business. But Sasol is there because what Sasol has really done in the last few years is not only have they increased their visibility and presence, but if you look at what they do at filling stations and all those, they've tried to tangibilize their business. And if you look at their marketing communications as well, they've tried to explain what the business of Sasol does for the everyday person.
It's very interesting because BP tried to do that, and they had that whole Beyond Petroleum campaign. So it started becoming customer facing, although it went horribly wrong with the oil spills.
The oil spill, yes.
But very interesting developments. Is this good news, Thebe? Because we've got so much bad news in the economy, but we do have these massive companies taking their products all over the world, making South African brands recognized globally. Is that some good news that we should grasp onto?
The bedrock of South Africa's success, the catalyst of South Africa's success is brands, is the entrepreneurs, the men and women who create ideas which we cannot live without. This is good news to us. It's good news because if you look at the top 100 most valuable brands in Africa alone, 72% of them come from South Africa, 26% from Nigeria, and 2% from Kenya. So South Africa as the most valuable a nation on the continent is certainly seen as a creative country. So when we look at our growth rate, which is under 2% and all those compared to our peer countries, but we certainly have the fundamentals in place. If you look at the country as an enabler as well, it's grown by 116% in the last 5 years, from 110 to 270 billion as a brand South Africa as a brand.
Oh, that's very interesting. But let's stick to the companies, because we don't have the biggest growing economy, but we have the biggest brands in Africa. And you're talking about intra-Africa trade and these brands being part of the African Renaissance. Explain what you mean.
You know, if you look at, and surveys have been, valuations have been looked at that if Africa as a continent, we increase intra-Africa trade by just 1%, will generate over $50 billion in revenues for Africa. So the countries which are going to be able to do intra-Africa trade are those countries which have got the ideas and the businesses. And South Africa is at the forefront of those. If we serve more other fellow African countries with South African made products or made in South Africa products, we'll be able to create more wealth, not just for the continent, but also certainly for South Africa. That's how we're going to grow the economy.
And this is about these big brands extending across Africa. But we're talking about big brands. What about the scope for entrepreneurs and up-and-coming brands?
Every brand started as a small brand. Discovery started as a small brand by Adrian Gore leaving Liberty to go start a small idea.
That's true, all our big ones.
All the big ones, they all started as small ideas. MTN started as a small idea. Nando's started as just one franchise, which is now around one of the biggest South African retailer or restaurant brands all over the world. So these brands, because they started as small brands, gives hope to the young entrepreneur out there who also wants to start something. The key, though, is to try and understand where South African and African consumers are, what are their key needs, and to try and see how do we use technology and how do we use financial services to enable us to create those businesses and brands.
Finally, Thebe, you say MTN and FNB are tapping into something unique, Madiba's values even, and resonating. Just explain what you mean.
If you look at Mandela, the brand, Mandela, the person, if you look at some of his attributes of diversity, celebrating people and all those, you look at brands like FNB and MTN, those brands have been able to transcend the functional business of what they do, but try to position themselves, and have done successfully so, as businesses which are enablers of a better life for Africans and for South Africans. And to us also an enabler of brand South Africa.
Well, our big companies are under the gun at the moment in some respects, so I like this, that they're also part of the good news. And thank you very much for your time. That was the chairman of Brand Finance Africa, Thebe Ikalafeng. Zimbabwe now